Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Dennis Giannoutzis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutzis.
Hey there, listeners. Well, welcome to 2025. I want to say thank you for tuning in to the Leadership is Changing podcast. But as we step into a brand new year, I want to take a moment to reflect on the incredible journey we've had in 2024. Over the past year, I've been privileged to feature some amazing guests on this podcast, leaders, change makers, and innovators who shared their wisdom, experiences, and insights. And together we've explored what it means to lead in today's ever-changing world. Over the next month, we're going to bring you some of these highlights. And in the Highlights 2024 episodes, we're bringing you some of the most impactful moments and key takeaways from 2024. Now, these highlights capture the essence of what this podcast is all about, helping leaders like you thrive in times of change and complexity. Now, whether it's tips on being courageous, thinking outside the box, adapting, or navigating transitions to higher levels of leadership, these snippets are sure to inspire and energize you for the year ahead. And of course, these highlights are just the tip of the iceberg. If something resonates with you, I encourage you to go and check out the full interviews from 2024 to dive deeper into the incredible conversations we've had. So let's get into it. Here are the highlights from 2024 on the Leadership is Changing podcast. Whereabouts in the world are you today?
Northern New South Wales, just about an hour and a half from the coast. I have a farm here with my wife and 3 kids, and we just love being out of the city.
Excellent. And a farm, do you have like livestock and things like that?
Yeah, we've got 70 cattle, we got chickens, and we got a whole bunch of different animals on the property.
How do you have time for that as well as all the other stuff you do?
I have a guy actually a guy who helps me work on the farm. So he does a couple of days a week for us here, looking after everything for us.
No, that helps. Yeah, very good. We'll talk a little bit more about time and about the way you work with things and so forth going forward. Now, tell us more about your background.
So my background isn't in business. When I finished high school, I started running volunteer leadership programs in the high schools. When I was in high school, I had a number of friends, unfortunately, that committed suicide. And so when I finished school, the first thing I did is I went back into the high school that I went to, and I was running leadership programs. So basically, they would give me the kids that were about to be expelled, or basically the rough kids. And then I would go to their football games. I'd take them to the gym. I'd spend time with them, try to keep them in school, help them through difficult situations. Then from there, I was part of a local church, and they saw what I was doing in the schools, and they basically wanted to help fund me so that I could do more of those programs. So I got put on staff as the youth pastor of the church. So while I was going through doing a degree in graphic design, I was running programs in the high schools. We'd do breakfast programs and then leadership programs, those types of things. And then I became the associate pastor of the church when I finished high school. Then I got promoted to be the national youth director, which is basically the pastor for all of the youth pastors in all of the churches around Australia in the Apostolic Church. And then my wife and I took on a volunteer position in a church on the Gold Coast. And so I needed to start making some money because the church couldn't pay me to run the program. But I felt like it was what we were supposed to do next. So we took that job and I started freelancing as a graphic designer. And then that freelancing business turned into a design agency. And then that design agency morphed into Lightning Sites, which was my first company. And then we built that company up over 7 years to about $3 million in revenue. I brought in a CEO to run that company last year, sold the majority of my shares in that business, and then I launched WorkPod. WorkPod is a business helping people to build teams in the Philippines. So that's like a very quick snapshot of my journey. But yeah, certainly didn't start in business. It was a byproduct of trying to make ends meet, which I think a lot of business owners could relate to.
Yeah, very much. Now, the Lightning site, bringing CEO on, and that was your little baby, right? You grew it. It was really cool. What was it like for you to let go?
It was quite difficult. I probably should have done it 12 months earlier in a sense of I thought about it, but I've had staff in that business for a decade, nearly a decade, 9 years. So the hardest part was just feeling like I'd let them down, but both businesses were growing rapidly. WorkPod had nearly grown to the same size as Lightning Sites, and I was the CEO of both. And I could tell that it was affecting the growth of the web development business. I wasn't able to give it my full attention. And I believe when you're the CEO of a business, you have a responsibility to all of the staff. You have a responsibility to all of the clients to give it your maximum effort. And if you can't give your maximum effort, then you're damaging the potential results of the employees. For me, that was the biggest thing. I was like, I promised the employees that we would be the best web development company in the world. It's not going to happen if I'm spread too thin across different organizations. And so, but it took me 12 months to come to that realization where, that I realized I wasn't being kind to them by staying in the game. I needed to bring someone else in.
Yeah. So sometimes we need to make those decisions, which they are hard at times, but we need to do it for the better good, if I can put it that way. So for the organization, for the staff, for the customers to do it. Because sometimes we can take on a lot and we can be the bottleneck of things as well, right? So yeah.
Exactly.
Now, WorkPod, so you're the CEO and the co-founder of WorkPod. Now, WorkPod, for our listeners, what is WorkPod? What do you do there?
So while I was building Lightning Sites, one of the major ways we scaled the business was building a team in the Philippines. And when I started to do that some 8-9 years ago, there wasn't very many options for building teams over there. There was freelancer websites like Upwork, Freelancer, and then there was agency models where the agencies would hire the staff on your behalf and then lease them to you. And neither of those approaches I felt were good approaches. Freelancer websites, you find freelancers, not people that are looking for long-term careers. And at agencies, the staff don't belong to your organization. They're hired by a different organization and leased to you, which again is not very good if you don't even own the most important resource in your own company. So to me, neither of those options were very good. And so when I built Lightning Sites, I went over there, had to create my own company, rent my own building. Later, we built our own building and had to do it myself. And so WorkPod was born when I built my own office for Lightning Sites and I had 50 spare desks. And so I decided to help some of my friends who'd been asking me over the years for help doing what I had done. And so I started hiring staff from my friends and putting them in my office. It was meant to just cover my own rent. That was my thinking. And then after helping my friends, they all wanted to grow their teams and I now had no more space. And that's how WorkPod was born. We decided to fit out another facility. So we fit out a facility for 450 desks. And then within 12 months, we filled that for other clients. And that was the start of WorkPod. So basically what we do is we offer the service that I wish I had, which is we help people find the staff, but instead of us hiring them and leasing them to our clients, we set up a direct relationship between the staff and that organization. So everybody, it works out better for everybody. The VA or the staff member in the Philippines gets paid more because they get paid directly. The Australian or New Zealand business, and we have clients in the US and UK as well, they paying directly, so they pay less price for the talent. And then we get paid directly by our client for the desk space in our office. So everything's more transparent. Everyone knows who's getting paid what. And ultimately, it's more affordable for the business owner and the person in the Philippines gets paid more. So I just think it's a better model and it seems to be going really well. People seem to be really liking it.
I actually have looked at different organizations that provide that kind of service, and you're right, your model is the best. It is awesome. It is professional, and also what I'm seeing so far is the fact that the way that you do it with the desk and providing all that, because at the end of the day, I think you are the CEO and the co-founder of an organization, but you actually are a community builder. That's the way I look at you, is that you're building a community of people in the Philippines there who are doing work for various customers, but then they are working together and being part of something which is very important. That's the way I look at it.
It is very much like that, building a community, and it's an extended community as well. The Philippines government says that if one person gets hired on a full-time salary, it actually supports 20 Filipinos. So like in the last 2 years, we've placed 800 staff, 800 times by 20, whatever that is. That's how many Filipinos are being impacted. So it's a wider community as well. We have a goal to place 10,000 jobs in the next 5 years. And if we do, that impacts 200,000 Filipinos. So that's really what our vision's all about.
Thank you, Dennis. I've been looking forward to this. Yeah, I can't wait to get into the discussion on leadership.
Me too. I've actually been looking forward to this as well. And Brent, whereabouts in the world are you today?
In the middle of the U.S., Omaha, Nebraska, and about a population of about 1 million people here.
Oh, 1 million people. Nice. Well, that's about where I am in Auckland. We're actually 1.5, I think, million now. But the whole country here in New Zealand is just 5 million. It's a little bit different. But the reason I asked that question about where you are in the world is that a lot of our listeners all around the world, of course, and they want to know where the guests are and so forth. So it's pretty cool to hear that from you. Now, I've given the listeners a little bit of an understanding about you as well, an introduction, but we would love to hear more about your background. I understand that you're the owner and the CEO of Midwest Laboratories. It's currently a company of about 300 employees, but also you're the author of a book called Leaders Look Within. So tell us more about your background.
Yeah, so I'm second generation owner here at Midwest Laboratories. My father started this company. I grew up in the business. And then at our business, we do a lot of testing in basically 3 verticals: agriculture, environmental, human health, and animal health. So we do a wide variety. We have over probably 5,000 test methods. We're a production lab. We get samples in a large volumes every single day. We're best known for pet food testing and soil testing. So 2 completely different areas, but again, one's for growers, one's for, again, pet food manufacturers, but volumes of samples, just to give you some perspective. On the soil side, we get in the fall after harvest, we'll get anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 a day. And then on the pet food side, we get 1,000 to 2,000 a day. So we do work with high volume samples, get results out in typically 3 to 5 days. So it takes a real big staff of scientists to do that. So you have scientists doing production work, which is really cool when you think about that.
So is now, because you're into spring this time of year that we're recording, so is now the busy time for you?
Spring is busy, fall is even busier, but we've had some unusual weather here. Like February, we had 70-degree temps. Usually we have snow on the ground and 0 to 30 degrees. So we had like our all-time record February in the history of the company this year based on that. We had a day where we got over 10,000 soils, which is unheard of in the winter. So it's almost like the ag season stretched almost all year this year,
Yeah.
which is unusual.
That's amazing, isn't it? It's not just leadership that's changing, the world's changing, everything's changing. It's just, it's really, really amazing. But that's a lot of samples to test, 20 to 40,000 a day. That's huge, right?
So I want to give you a background there. So how did I end up where I'm at today? Basically, I grew up in the company with my dad. I started at the age of 15. And then through college, right after college, I got an education and a business degree. My dad and I had this pact, and he said, "You're not ready to come back to the business now. You need to go out and you need to get your own experience and then consider what that experience is like. And then at some point, maybe it would be a good time to come back to the company." So I did that. I taught for 5 years, high school, college. And then from there, I worked in the corporate world at places like Arthur Andersen, Mutual of Omaha, HDR. And then in 2005, I did come back to Midwest Laboratories as a marketing director, worked 10 years. Then in 2016, my dad and his two partners retired. And it was my dad and myself for 5 years. And then he finally retired at the age of 80 in 2020. And there's just so many lessons from 2016 to now. I think that's probably been the biggest growth. And not only myself, but the company, just a lot of changes. And that's where I'm really passionate about is leadership and what that whole transformation was like. And that's the reason I wrote the book.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, wow. That's a cool background you've just shared with me, because I find that today there are people who are the age of 60, 65, 70 going, I've got this business, I've built this business, I don't have anyone to hand it to or for them to buy it off me, whether it's family, sons, daughters, and so forth, even though they've got sons and daughters. And so they're not wanting to get into the business. I think what your dad did was really smart, the sense of go and get more experiences and around the world and other places before you come back into here. to make sure that you did really want to go back into that organization,
Exactly.
which was really smart. Yeah. I don't know about, that's what we're finding here in the US. Are you finding that as well? That where do they hand the business
Oh,
to?
yeah, exactly. I was 40 when I came back. I think of my kids, I have 5 kids, they're in their 20s. I want them to experience everything in their careers and career path, everything that they want. I don't know at this point in my timing. I don't know. We can get a little bit about that with succession planning. I don't know who the next person to take over is, but I've started down that path because you do have to talk about it and you do have to have kind of a plan and initiative. Our company's been around 49 years. I still drive my wife crazy, but I say we're a 49-year-old startup. It feels that way to me because just again, all the changes that we have put in probably in the last 5 or 6 years.
Excellent. So next year, the 50-year startup. Yep.
Yes.
Excellent. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit later on about the succession planning legacy. I think that's something we're needing to do as leaders as well, which is important because we need to set the future up. And I think that's our role and responsibility. But I'll get to that in a second. The other thing I wanted to ask was in the sense of you coming back 40 years of age, a lot more mature because of the experiences you had. For the listeners that are listening who may be, well, I think let me put it another way. I think a lot of people today aren't in an organization for 20 years, 30 years. They're in the organization they get rid of the zero, right? They're there for 2 years, 3 years. The importance of people to go out there and get more experiences before they really go off to go and do something else in life. How important is that? What should they be doing and thinking about in relation to their career?
Yeah. Looking back, obviously hindsight is 2020, but I think about it. That's how I was. My professional career, it was 5 years, 2 years, 5 years, 3 years. It was very short. I worked, and maybe you can relate to this. I wanted to work more hours than anybody else because I wanted to find the way to move up the ladder as quickly as I could. So I thought that was hard work, putting in more hours than everybody else, learning as much as I could. Just again, that was just my world was I have to do all these things because to see, make sure I get noticed by somebody or somehow get my break. I have to move from this company. I've gone so far. Maybe I go over to here. And that's all I thought about constantly, even when I was on the job. I think I was just always thinking about my next move or my next job, which is again, I don't know if that's so healthy to really think that way, but that's really the only way I was really taught how to do that. That was the only way I could see that I was going to move up.
Yeah, I do relate to it because that's what I did as well. And I think it's smart because of the way I talk about it, Brent, it's about your brand, right? Because you've got a brand as a company that you're working for, but it's you as an individual a brand that goes elsewhere as well, which is very important. So that brand has to grow, but the only way it can grow is not just because you turn up. It's because you actually are in there and you're doing a lot of work, and that's where we actually learn a lot. So yeah, I think you're right. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on with around employees too, because I don't know what they're thinking today. So I'd love to get your point of view too around it. Succession planning, legacy, that side of things. And it's good to hear that you're underway with it too, because I think a lot of organizations leave it too late or they don't think about it at all. What are you doing in the sense of you're saying you're kicking it off, getting underway with it or well underway with it already? What are you doing? How are you doing that?
With regards to the succession planning,
Yep.
I used to think that was a terrible word. My dad, he really ignored it. He really didn't have, but again, it's different. It's the way we were both brought up. He came from the farm and then we went to college, worked his jobs. So he was in the day to day all the time. He never knew how to get out of the day to day. He was in the day to day till he was 80 years old. And that was probably, again, that's that whole transition to leadership we can talk about. But the succession planning, I used to think that was a terrible word. I didn't want to, except when I was looking at my dad, I was like, hey, dad, what's the plan? What are you thinking here? And he would say, I don't know. We'll figure that out sometime later. So again, what I think as a leader and you are out of the day to day that you want to take the company someplace. So for me, I needed some framework and I can't remember exactly where I heard it, but I just came up with this, you know what? I need to set the vision for the next 10 years. I'm going to come this next 10 years from 2025 to 2035, the succession plan piece. I don't know what's going to happen in 2035, but I want to plan for it. I want the employees to know where the company's headed. I want my kids to know where the company's headed. And I'm very excited. You could tell I get really passionate. I get excited about it because now it's really a 10-year plan of strategy that this is what I want to put in place. This is the legacy, as you say, this is the legacy I want to build and leave in 10 years. And as we go along, obviously you can change, update it, but give yourself some time to really work it out. Give yourself a couple of years to determine, hey, are any kids interested? But don't just say, wake up one day and say, hey, kids, which one of you is taking over? I need to know right now. I think that's what typically happens. And then, well, I don't care. Most families that I don't care. And then you sell it. And I know if I sell the company tomorrow, it won't be the same company. It's what drives me. I do not want to sell. No way. I get offers every single day, but I will never sell.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.